All right, so welcome everyone. I know, as I said in the intro when everyone was getting set up, there's obviously been a lot of interest in this topic. There's a lot to cover today. I'm going to go through it very quickly, but I will also stop and pause where there are questions about certain issues, certain topics that I cover off, certain strategies, and I will encourage people to share, and I may even unmute people to have a discussion as well. So let's get into it. So welcome. I know everyone's very busy. Obviously, there's a lot on people's minds on top of the normal strains and challenges of business. So I really appreciate that everyone's taking the time to attend this. Now, very quickly, the agenda outline. So I'll share with you the results of the survey. So thanks for those that have completed the survey. Now, a few more came through last night, which I haven't included. But I've got quite a few there to share. I'll be covering off 11 key strategies to consider during this current climate. And they'll be grouped into 3 areas, being leadership, protecting your profits, and managing your cash flow. As I was putting the final touches on the presentation, I realized there were probably 2 more that I wanted to squeeze in. So I've got 2 more bonus areas that I wanted to cover off too. And then lastly, just talking about the implementation of these strategies and the next steps, okay? So very quickly, just a quick intro to myself and Channa Naylor. So my name's Anil Puri. A lot of you already know me, but a lot of you don't. I was fortunate enough that there was quite a bit of interest in this webinar, and a few of my partners, both within Channa Naylor and outside of Channa Naylor, have shared this with their clients. So hi, I'm a trained accountant. I've got over 25 years of business improvement experience in a wide range of industries. I've been running my own business coaching business now for 15 years. I'm part of Channa Naylor, and Channa Naylor is a national accounting, finance and advisory group. We've got 11 offices around the country. There are 4 in Sydney, 4 in Melbourne, 2 in Brisbane and 1 in Perth. And we have over 200 staff. And we do have, I think we've got one of the partners from Sydney is on this call, also Janelle from Brisbane, Philip in Melbourne, and I think Lillian in Perth was having an early start and trying to get on this call as well. Okay, so as I said in my intro, I'm going to cover off a lot today, so we will have to go through it fairly quickly, but I will be monitoring my chat box. So if you do have questions throughout the webinar, feel free to type them in. I'll try to keep an eye on those and address those either immediately during the presentation and during the slides and strategies that I share, or at the end when we have a bit more time for Q&A. All right. So for those that have just joined, if you can just open up your chat box, if you just hover over your Zoom screen, you should see a chat icon, and if you just open that up and say hi, that would be fantastic. All right, so let's get into it. The first thing I wanted to cover off is the snapshot of the survey. Okay, so one of the reasons I did the survey was just for me to get a bit of an understanding of the types of businesses that will be on the call. Now, as I said, a few people have completed the survey either late last night or this morning, which I haven't included, but there's a snapshot of the types of industries that are on the call today. So far, the biggest category is this consulting and professional services, lots of trades, manufacturing, import distribution. There are a few hospitality and retail, and I know they've probably been particularly hit with the coronavirus outbreak, and may be further hit down the track. So it's just good to get a bit of a snapshot of who's on the webinar. And also the size of the businesses. So what it shows is that over 75% of the people that registered have staff. Okay, so, and that is an area of concern. There are a lot of questions that I saw come through the survey related to staffing, leave entitlements if people are quarantined. And now I do have Greg from HR Success on the call today. And I will be unmuting him and giving him an opportunity to share, for you to ask questions and for him to share some of that knowledge that he has a little bit down the track. And Greg's someone I work quite closely with. He helps quite a few of my clients, and we work quite closely together. All right, so has your business experienced an impact already? So some have said no, and none anticipated, which is great. No, but feel that there is some impact coming. So most people haven't been impacted greatly at the moment, but a few have been significantly or severely impacted, which is understandable. It does depend, obviously, on the industry and the sort of work that you do. So we'll cover off a bit more of that as we go through the presentation. Actually, if I just go back one, I've got my notes here of the comments that people made. And the main impacts that people have had have either been that revenue is being impacted because people are cancelling orders, being apprehensive about going ahead with the service that they normally would. And on the flip side, people are being impacted by either supply issues, either products that they would normally use as part of their service, either manufacturing or import distribution businesses, for example, but also labour. So quite a few people are concerned about what happens if their staff become sick or need to quarantine or are exposed to someone who has been diagnosed with COVID-19. So both of those supply issues, whether it's staff and their availability or products. So I was talking to a client yesterday. He's got plenty of work coming through. He's an electrician. He does new houses, wiring up of new houses. Plenty of work still in the pipeline. His concern is that will he have staff who can do it, because one of his staff, is waiting on the test results of a friend of his who may be exposed and may be positive. So these things are all, there's a lot of different variables that could affect businesses. And what have you done to combat the effects? It's good to see that quite a few people have already taken some proactive action. And you can see from the list of questions that I asked, they're the things I'm going to be covering off, plus more things in this webinar. But it's good that people have started to take action, and I want to encourage more people to take action and not just to sit on the sidelines. Okay. And lastly, the question around the federal government stimulus. Will it help? Will it not? A lot of people are not sure. They're not sure how the stimulus works and whether or not it will help them. So I will be taking you through that as well. But I'll probably be deferring you to the experts and your accountants and encourage you to talk to them. But I will be covering off a bit of information there. All right, so let's get into it. 11 strategies to use in the current climate. So once again, if you've got a pad handy and a pen, I encourage you to take some notes. Now, for those that have just joined, I will be sharing this presentation and it is being recorded, but I will share the slides with you. So no need to write down everything. Just write down the things that you think are applicable to you and that you might want to implement in your business. And I'll ask a question at the end of the webinar around that. All right, so as I said, the three categories I want to cover off are leadership, protecting profits, and protecting your cash flow or managing your cash flow. So the first part of leadership. Now, number one is to actually lead. Okay, so obviously that's a big part of leadership. And I want to cover off in each of these slides some key points for you to consider as part of each of these strategies. All right, so what do I mean by lead? First of all, don't panic. And you need to be positive and proactive. I had a manager of one of my clients email me yesterday, and he's concerned that his boss, who is my client, is not projecting the positivity that he would prefer him to project. And I can understand that as a business owner, there's a lot of risk. It all falls onto our shoulders. It's our bank balance. It's the hard decisions that we need to make. And so there's obviously going to be a lot more strain on a business owner than there are on the staff. And they may not all appreciate that. But at the same time, it is up to us as leaders of our businesses and in our industries to stay positive. And I liken it to a party or a networking event. So if you went to a party or if you met people at a party and you met people who are down and negative and always talking about, what may, the woes of their life, they're people you want to avoid, okay, generally. and you automatically gravitate towards people who are positive, who are enthusiastic. And the same is going to happen in this situation. Your customers will gravitate towards businesses that are positive, that are proactive, that want to try things and have a can-do attitude. And same with your team. Okay, so your attitude, your mindset will flow down to the rest of your team and to your customers. So just be very aware of that. Now I'm going to flick over to my iPad and just let me know. Can you see the iPad up on the screen there? And I want to cover off, yes, people are saying yes, good. I want to cover off a concept by Stephen Covey, and it's called the circle of concern and the circle of influence. So there are two circles. Now over here, we have all of these things that we're concerned about out there in the world, and obviously there's a lot more over the last couple of weeks in particular, the last few weeks. But inside that circle is another circle, which is our circle of influence. Now, if we focus on this area here, the circle of concern that we can't really do anything about, it's just counterproductive. So really, really we need to focus on, on this circle here, our circle of influence, our circle of control. If we focus too much on the circle of concern where we don't have any control or influence, it's just causing us stress for no reason. We need to be aware of what's out there, but we need to focus on what we can control and what we can influence, okay? Otherwise, it's just counterproductive and it's just a waste of energy. All right, so back to my prez, and I've got a couple of extra points on that. We need to set an example. We need to look for opportunities, and I'll talk about that. There are quite a few opportunities that people have shared as part of the survey, just through discussions that I've had with people. And as I said, focus on what you can do. Don't focus on the circle of concern. It's about focusing on the circle of influence. Now, you need to consult with your staff. You need to get their input. You need to consult with others. But you need to make the decision, and you need to be decisive. Don't dilly-dally and make decisions quickly. Mute Pete. Pete, if you can please mute yourself. Actually, I can mute you. And just try that again. Pete, if you can just mute yourself. For some reason, I can't mute you. There we go, mute audio. Okay, so sorry about that, everyone. So just a reminder, if everyone can just keep themselves on mute and keep your videos off, that would be great. But thanks for the comment. So yeah, be consultative, but be decisive. And I encourage people to make decisions around this issue, understand what the impacts may be, and make those decisions sooner rather than later. And lastly, be fair and empathetic, whether it's with your team, whether it's with others out there in the community, but be realistic too. And what I mean by that is that every business is going to be in a different situation. Some will have plenty of surplus funds that they can draw on. Others will be a lot tighter in terms of margins and cash surpluses. So some businesses may be able to weather the storm a bit easier and maybe potentially hold on to staff or not reduce hours. Their things will come to, but others may need to make decisions more quickly. Okay, so it's going to be case by case. And at the end of this webinar, I will be, if anyone wants to catch up for a quick phone call, I'll send you a link about that. Happy to chat, because every business is different and needs a review on an individual basis, I think. All right, and once again, let me know if there's any questions as you go. Okay, so the second area is being proactive with your communication, and I'll give some good examples around this. So you obviously need to communicate with your team regularly, keep them informed, make sure they understand, what the situation is, what the potential, how things may develop over the coming weeks. Definitely with your customers. Now, I was just chatting to actually one of the ladies here in the office who runs another business. She's a sleep therapist, and I asked her whether she's had some cancellations, and she said she has. And I asked her, well, have you actually proactively communicated to your customers and your patients about the hygiene practices you have, and the extra things that you're doing to help allay those fears? And she said she hasn't. So definitely encourage you to be proactive. Now, I actually, I'll share my screen again over here. I've actually got a private Facebook group that I have quite a few members in. And I asked the question about what they're doing to communicate to their customers. And I gave an example of this cafe here in Penrith, locally, that I felt did a great job just being proactive, putting it out on their Facebook page, about how seriously they're taking hygiene, giving some tips for people to refer to, referring back to their 5-star food and safety certificate, and so on. So I definitely encourage you to be proactive with customers. Once they've made a decision not to come, it's hard to convince them otherwise. So get on the front foot and re-emphasize your hygiene practices and allay those fears that they may have. Okay. So I might just ask a question quickly, who has done that and what sort of response they've had, just in your chat box. So if you can just chat away while I continue, and I might just refer to those comments. Definitely with customers, with suppliers, once again, I will come to more specific strategies around, maybe extending terms, keeping them informed if you can't pay for whatever reason. I think people are generally quite accommodating if you're open and honest. So it is all about being proactive with the communication. With your networks, so it could be your partners that you have, other people that you work with out there, outside of your supply network. So Darren's just sharing here. Yes, he's done a bulk client email, social media, and clients have felt a lot of relief as we were on the front foot. There you go. So Darren's got a great example there. Wayne has done it with customers through WhatsApp and group chat. Lee as well, who is one of my clients, an IT company. And he said here he got many thanks for keeping people in the loop. Okay, Sue, who runs a communications business, has obviously gotten out there as well. So, so they're just great examples that get on the front foot. People appreciate it. People want some reassurance and communication in these sort of uncertain times. So just get out there and do that. And maybe even to the community as well, depending on the sort of business you have. If you have a lot of community involvement, then definitely get out there and put some sort of press release out or some sort of statement. All right, so just having a look at other people who've shared comments. Now, thirdly, be aware of the trigger points. Now, you can't just bury your head in the sand. You need to be aware of potential downturns in the business. Now, I won't go through this in too much detail because I think people are pretty aware of that. Things like reduced leads, be aware of those, cancelled orders, customers not rebooking, debtors not paying, and I will come back to that as well in terms of managing cash flow. And just keep your ear to the ground, all right? Just don't panic, but just obviously be aware of what's happening out there in your industry, okay? Now, with all of these 11 areas that I want to cover, I'm going to spend more time in certain areas that I think are more important than others, but I just wanted to cover off some of these ones quickly. But definitely don't put your head in the sand. Be aware of the trigger points, understand what's happening in your business. I'm sure it's front of mind anyway, so but I thought I'd just make the points. Now, fourthly, planning to work from home. Definitely it's something that we all need to do or all need to look at, and it's mainly because of the risk of your team. If they're in contact with one of your team who tests positive, then the whole team effectively needs to go into lockdown, into isolation. All right. So, and that will ruin a lot of businesses. Even if you've got plenty of work coming through the door in terms of revenue and customers, if you don't have a team to do the work, then you're in a a lot of risk. So I know companies, IT companies, for example, who have instigated a policy where their service techs work from home. They don't come into the office. They go from home to the client site and then back to home to avoid them potentially getting caught with exposure to other people who may be tested positive. Because if that happens, then they basically have no tech team. So definitely understand the risks and encourage your team. Well, every business is different, but definitely understand the risks and be proactive about working from home and distancing your team from each other. Upgrade technology. I think I just heard someone, yeah, if you can all make sure that you're on mute, that would be great. Yes, Justin saying that's us. Yes, minimizing the risk of group cross-contamination. So upgrade technology. So I might unmute Lee in a minute. Lee's one of my clients from Tresemme Computers. He's been inundated with people who've been wanting to purchase laptops and set themselves up from home. So definitely look at doing that. Remote access, obviously, being able to access your server in the office or using the cloud to access your information. Virtual meeting software, so I will come back to that. So I use Zoom, but a lot of people I know use Office 365, and Office 365 has some team meeting software built in. It's called Microsoft Teams. So I will unmute or ask Lee to unmute himself. Lee, are you out there? We've got so many people on the list here. I'm not sure who's on and who's not. There you go. Yep, hi, Lee.
Hi, Neil. How are you?
Good. Can everyone hear Lee? I think so. Lee, do you want to just share what Microsoft Teams is?
Right, so Microsoft Teams is a team collaboration tool which allows you to do anything from instant messaging chat to sharing files to then voice and video conference and all that sort of stuff. So we're finding a lot of customers, if their workforce is splitting up and people are working from home and all that sort of stuff, obviously they're trying to work out the best way to keep everyone communicating, to still possibly hold meetings and all that sort of stuff. And it's a really good tool that allows it.
Yeah, great. And that's free, is it? And it's part of Office 365, is that?
Yeah, so it's part of any Office 365 business subscription. It's available. It is also, even people that don't have it, I believe, can go out and get a free version that has limited usage, but can do most of the things. I think they just can't hold video meetings, but other than that, they can use it for chat and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's available. Anyone's got Office 365. It's part of the tools that's given to you, and it's a very good tool for in these situations.
Great. Excellent, Lee. I might just get you to mute yourself again, but definitely if anyone needs, I think Lee's pretty inundated, but I'm sure he's happy to have a chat to anyone who just wants some advice around that. Now, Shirley's just commented that they've started using Team at work and it's really good. Excellent. Paid software, I'm sure you can pay for Teams. I use Zoom, which is similar. It probably doesn't have all the functionality of Teams. Teams, I think, does a lot more chat type of communication as well, whereas Zoom I use predominantly for video meetings. All right, so definitely look at your internet capacity, if you might need to upgrade that, if you're having more access from people outside of the office, and phones as well. Looking at potentially VoIP solutions or other ways that you can have a distributed phone setup. So definitely talk to your IT provider, and they can normally help you there as well. All right, any other questions about working from home? Just let me know. Leanne said Google Hangouts, Slack are all free options and they do video conferencing. Great. So that was Google Hangouts and Slack. All right, so let's get into the dollars and cents part of it. Let's talk about protecting profits. Now, first up, I'd like to talk about reviewing and cutting costs. Definitely, I think this is a #1 priority. Don't wait, and it's probably good practice anyway to review your costs on a regular basis. So what I would do is get your profit and loss statement and just go through all of the lines and work out you know, whether or not some of those have blown out, you haven't addressed those recently. There may be mobile phones that are hanging around that you no longer need. You may need to go back to your insurance broker and get get quotes, energy suppliers, all of those sorts of things. So definitely do that. Start with the big end of town. If you do need to cut things, obviously we want to try to look after fellow small business owners. The big end of town normally has more insurances in place, more funds in place to cope with these sorts of challenges. And try not to cut expenses that are helping you to grow or to be more efficient. Okay, so I'll talk about marketing in a minute, but just be aware that, you know, if you do stop spending money on things that are helping you grow and generating leads, that's going to be hard to come back later. So just and if you need a hand reviewing this, talk to your accountant, or happy to have a chat to you and run through your particular business and how, what you may be able to do to trim costs. Review and redirect your marketing. Now, there are definitely ways to re-look at how much you're spending on marketing, whether it's effective. I will be talking about marketing a bit down the track. But if you don't know what's working and what's not with your marketing, I definitely encourage you to know your numbers around that. You know, what sort of return you're getting from different marketing channels, different marketing tactics that you have out there, and really understand which ones are paying for themselves and which ones aren't, and continue to monitor it over time. So if you're doing Google AdWords, for example, and you know it's been working in the past, just monitor it going forwards and see if there is a drop off, and whether you can refine the messaging, and just re-look at tapping into more about the concerns that people are having out there. And I'll talk about that more when I talk about marketing. And look at your personal expenses as well. It's not just about your business expenses. You may need to trim back on your personal expenses and lifestyle if your business is having an impact. You know, I don't want to get people to panic. And the whole toilet paper fiasco is a great example. You know, all of these people have been hoarding toilet paper and other supplies. They're probably thinking now, see, you know, lucky we did it when we did, because, you know, we would have been caught out. But they don't realize that if they didn't do it, everyone would be fine. Okay, so don't fall into the trap of getting into a panic or negative spiral, because it can become self-fulfilling. But you need to be realistic as well. All right, so now the sixth area is obviously looking at staff cuts and staff changes. And I will ask Greg from HR Success to maybe chime in here, because a lot of the questions that I got from the survey were around both the stimulus package and how that works, but also what the entitlements were for staff, what the obligations were for us as employers. So I will get Greg to maybe answer some questions in a minute. All right, so let's just go through these. Yes, appreciate this can be a very tough decision for a lot of people, because obviously your staff's and your team's livelihood is very important to you. Look at negotiating holidays and unpaid leave. Now, my understanding is that you can't force people to take annual leave, but you can discuss it with them and encourage them to take leave. Reduce hours and pay, and know your sick leave obligations, and also be aware of the stimulus support, okay? Because there is support out there, which I'll cover off later, that will help you with your wages bill, especially with apprentices. So Greg, are you on the call? I'm pretty sure you are. I might just get you to, actually, before you do, Greg, I was talking to Nicole, who is one of my clients, funnily enough, on the way into the office this morning. And Nicole, I might just get you to unmute yourself and just share some of the concerns or questions you had around staffing. And then I might get Greg to maybe chime in. Nicole, are you there? So just unmute yourself, Nicole. I'm not sure if Nicole's there. All right, so actually, Greg, I might just get you to unmute yourself then and just share some of the maybe cover off some of these points.
Yep. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me, Anil?
Yes, I can hear you fine, Greg.
Yep.
I'm sure everyone else can as well. And while Greg's speaking, if anyone has any specific questions around this area, can you just type it into your chat box, and I'll refer those back to Greg as well. But just Greg, in terms of what's the points that are on the screen at the moment.
Yes. Yep. Well, needless to say, we're getting a lot of inquiries. So, and it's fair to say also that the situation's very much a bit of a movable feast, to be perfectly honest. There's some things that are clear. There's some things that are not clear. But I guess if we just address, and I guess there's two areas that we're getting most inquiries about. One is the sort of whole business downturn issue. What do we do? Because business is taking a bit of a hit, and how do we manage that? And the second area of questions that we're getting relates to sort of leave entitlements and all that sort of stuff. So
that's in particular, Greg, that's in particular specifically to if people have to self-isolate, for example.
Yes, yeah. So we're getting a lot of queries around that. So do you want me to address one or other of those first, or?
Sure, you can address the first one in terms of. Actually, let's do the self-isolation, because that's probably.
Okay. Yeah. So the situation with leave, as I said, some of it's clear, some of it's not so clear. It is clear that if somebody's diagnosed with COVID-19, or they're providing care or support to a family member, that they have access to their personal and carers leave, in the case of full-time and part-time staff, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So that one's pretty clear. The situation with isolation is a little bit more challenging and confusing. Our information at this stage is that people that were overseas at the time that the government made the recent announcement that people are required to go into isolation. So that was from midnight on the 15th of March, I believe. So anybody that was overseas at that time and has since arrived back and therefore needs to go into isolation, our understanding is that they can access available paid personal leave.
Mm-hmm.
However, if employees are travelling after that date or have left Australia from the 16th of March onwards, which, frankly, advice is that people shouldn't be doing that. But anyway, if people have done that, when they get back, it's our understanding that they won't be able to access paid personal leave on their return.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. They were silly enough to go over.
Yeah, that's right. So, they have to, take another 2 weeks annual leave or whatever it might be, or leave without pay upon their return.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess another challenging case is where people have been in contact with confirmed cases of the virus. So they may not have it themselves, but they have been in contact with somebody that's had it. Whilst the government recommendation is that those people self-isolate, it's our understanding at this stage that they would not be able to access paid personal leave because they're not actually unwell. So now there are heaps of lobby groups, the ACTU, plus also some of the business groups, I think, are lobbying the government to sort of do something about that in terms of subsidies and whatnot. But to date, there's been no decision on that. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Now, there's a couple of questions here. One is, what's the difference between paid personal leave and annual leave? So paid personal leave is effectively sick leave or carers leave. Is that?
Yes, so the old sick leave is now called personal/carers leave, and you can use that in the event of personal illness or injury, obviously, but also when you're providing care and support to a family member. And annual leave is the old 4 weeks leave a year.
Another question someone had is, can we require or request people to take some of their long service leave accrual almost at 10 years? Now, I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Almost at 10 years. So it sounds like that person's sort of saying that they've got somebody that's maybe 9 years or something, and there's about to kick over the 10 years, and at which point they'll get entitlement to their long service leave. So they're sort of, I think, suggesting that, you know, can we ask them to take it so that when they hit the 10 years, it actually comes off. Look, you can make any arrangement that you like that's above and beyond the minimum obligations that are required upon you. I generally don't advise that people pay leave in advance. It often doesn't end well. People leave and then all of a sudden, you know, people are in debit in terms of their leave, and then there's a whole issue about can you recover it. So generally I don't recommend it, but could you come to some sort of personal arrangement with somebody? Yes, where it's in excess of the minimum entitlements that you need to provide.
Yeah. All right. So any specific situations like that, they can talk to you anyway. Now, we better move on. Now, there's another question here. What if they exhaust their leave entitlement? Then obviously they would go on to unpaid leave.
Yes, or in the event of if they exhaust their personal carers leave, they should be given the option of drawing upon other forms of leave.
Annual leave.
Annual leave and whatnot. But you shouldn't apply that automatically. You need to actually ask the person if that's what they want you to do. Yeah. And if they don't want to do that or they don't have it, then yes, there's no option but leave without pay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's what, Eric, that relates to your question as well. Now, on the flip side, if there's a downturn in business and you need to make changes to staffing arrangements, so whether it's hours, reducing hours, or even terminating staff, you want to cover off those?
Yep. Again, it's challenging to provide general advice, but you know, we'll do the best we can. But certainly, in some cases, you can direct people to take leave. However, they're very specific circumstances, such as where somebody's got excess annual leave available to them. And that most awards, they talk about excess leave being 8 weeks. And you have to provide generally something like 4 weeks notice of in order to direct them to take that leave. So that's a pretty challenging one. The first step, in my view, should be to just try and negotiate with people and just say, look, guys, you know, unfortunately this thing's hitting and it's affecting our business. I don't want to lose members of the team. I want to keep you all engaged beyond once we get over this hump. However, we need to do something, you know, who's prepared to take some leave. And you can, you know, people might elect to take 1 or 2 weeks. Other employers are starting to negotiate arrangements whereby people take 1 or 2 days of their leave per week, just so that it's reducing the leave accruals, you know, helping them cope with the less demand on services. So, you know, you can negotiate things like that. But as for directing people to take leave, that's it's pretty limited, the circumstances in which you can do that, frankly.
Yeah. Okay.
And
reducing hours.
Yep, reducing hours. Again, you know, you really need to check the specifics of any awards, agreements and contracts. You can do it in certain cases, but generally speaking, you can certainly do it if you negotiate with the person and then have a bit of a conversation about, well, sorry, but, you know, this is sort of what we need to do. Would you agree to reducing hours for a period? If you get the employee's agreement, then that's fine. Make sure you document it though. And however, in terms of forcing reduction of hours, that's quite a bit more.
Yeah, so it's similar to the annual leave. You know, it's all
directing to take annual leave. Yeah.
All right, we better. Lastly, there was a question about, you know, if you did have to shut your office down, are staff required to use leave? Sorry, I'm just finding out again. Or do we have to pay staff as normal wages? Now, that's a bit of a tricky one.
Yeah, well, there's actually a lot of concerns about shutdown arrangements because you know, some awards a lot of awards do allow for, but not all of them, do allow for stand downs or close downs in certain circumstances, whereby you may actually be able to put people on effectively leave without pay, just stand them down for a period.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, that's been used for things like breakdowns of machinery and or natural disasters. It's never been, we've never had this sort of situation. So to be honest, there's just people scratching their heads saying, well, they don't know if that meets this circumstance.
All right, we better move on because I've still got a lot to cover. So appreciate that, Greg. I might just get you to mute yourself. Now, after this webinar is over, I will be sharing the slides, and I will also include Greg's contact details if anyone wants to speak with Greg. And I was speaking with Greg yesterday that he's happy to just have a complimentary 10-15 minute chat, and just to better understand your circumstances. All right, so better move on. Someone's asked, wanting to confirm we can dismiss underperforming staff. Okay, so Greg, actually, I might just get you to unmute yourself quickly. Now, this is probably not a COVID-19 question. It's more just a general question about staff and terminating staff that are underperforming. My understanding is that the unfair dismissal laws don't apply if you have less than 15 staff. Is that correct still?
Not entirely correct. A person has been engaged in a small business, which is fewer than 15 employees, they cannot lodge a claim for unfair dismissal in most circumstances unless they've been terminated after 12 months employment. So within the first 12 months, you've got there's a lower risk of unfair dismissals and so on. Once you go over the 12 months, the level of exposure elevates in terms of unfair dismissals. But, there's something called the Small Business Fair Dismissal Code. In theory, if you follow that, then you should be okay.
Yeah, all right. I might just get you to mute yourself again, Greg. But I think in general, and Greg and I have talked about these sorts of things before, I think it still makes sense to do the right thing with your team and address performance issues, address it in writing. Sure, if you've got 15 staff or less, you may not need to legally have to do that, but I think it still makes sense to address it, put it in writing, and then monitor it and see if it improves. And just be open with your team around that. All right, we better keep going. And lastly, in terms of staffing decisions, if you have to cut numbers, you have to cut numbers. I mean, that's just a fact of life. Different businesses will have different levels of cash reserves, for example, and different culture. So at the end of the day, it's up to every business owner what they do and what they can do. But definitely, if it's about the survival of your business, if it's about the survival of your family, then really you need to do the right thing to make sure your business stays viable for the long term, and that you can re-employ when things change. Okay, if you're in that situation. All right, so now let's shift gear. So we've talked about cost cutting. Let's now talk about some opportunities to grow revenue. And I understand not every business is in this situation where they can shift their business model, but just a few things to consider. One is online selling and deliveries. Definitely prepare for it now. Even if you don't need to do it for this current crisis, I think it's good to have a business model that allows for it down the track. So prepare for it. If people don't come to you, then you need to be able to go to them. Understand what sort of packaging may be needed for your particular service or product, and start getting that in place. And definitely start communicating with your customers. And we can see people doing that already. Whether it's online, over the phone, delivering, contactless delivering, we can see that happening out there. Now, interestingly enough, I had an appointment with a specialist at the Nepean Hospital this afternoon, And I was rung by the hospital yesterday and said that we're actually doing phone consultations and for those that can. So they are already looking at ways that they can reduce the amount of contact that they have with people and move to other forms instead of face-to-face. But on the flip side, if you've got a gym that people normally come to, can you organise personal trainers to go out to them and maybe do some group classes? There's a whole range of things. I'd love to hear from people around this area. If anyone on this call has already initiated a change in their model where they go, so they can still provide a service when people can't come to them. Apart from those that are in an office and can use technology, it's more for cafes, gyms, anyone like that. It'd be great to hear. So Kimberly runs an OT business, occupational therapy. So they've started a telehealth service, which is great. Kimberly, actually, I'd love to unmute you and have a chat, but I don't think we've got time. If anyone else has anything that they've done, it is about looking for opportunities. So obviously mortgage broking, it's easier. You can do online meetings. Appointments via Zoom or phone. I think professional services is fairly, we can get around it fairly easily. I'm keen to hear if anyone is doing that where they have a venue. So I'll keep going, and I might refer back to that as we get some more responses. All right. So the other part of protecting your profits is, instead of focusing on new business, look at your existing customers and getting repeat business out of them. Okay. So focus on existing customers. Use your database. I'd love to hear who actually has a database that they regularly contact. That's it's in a good enough shape that they can go through and contact people. Love to hear a yes or a no from people out there. It's a vital tool and asset that you really need to use and build in your business. So go back to that database, contact people, see if you can get existing customers to either come back and use your services, or if they have a need for additional services. So some examples of that. So I've got a signage client who does car wraps. They do a lot of event signage. So a lot of their event signage is, they're getting cancellations, but they've got a lot of corporate customers that they're going to go back to and offer to put signs up about hygiene, about, different communication for their team. So there are opportunities to go back to people that have used you in the past and offer services. And I think it's easier to do that in a lot of cases than try to get new business in the door. So definitely go back to your database, focus on those existing customers, create deals just for them, make them feel special. Increase your customer service. This is a key one. Hopefully everyone out there already has fantastic customer service, but you can't afford to lose your existing customers. And especially in the current circumstances and situation, if you can provide exceptional customer service, especially when people are concerned and potentially unhappy about other things that are happening around them, if they can see you as being a standout and being positive, as I said in my first slide, then they will tell others as well. All right. So it's a great way to keep your current customers, but also get the word out there about what you're doing. And I actually had a client who communicated a pricing policy out to their database recently, and their customers, where they have decided to withhold a price increase that they had planned because of this situation and to help all of their customers out. And they have got fantastic kudos about that. So definitely look at how you can be empathetic and just provide that extra customer service right now. And definitely go back to your customers, go back to your database and see what additional services you might be able to provide and what additional help they need. All right, so now next is market and sell. Definitely continue to market. Don't stop marketing, but you need to review what is and isn't working, and you really need to trim those expenses that aren't working and focus on the marketing that is working. So which means you really need to be able to track where your leads are coming from, which campaigns are working, and really understand the numbers around that. You may also need to modify your approach and your message out to your marketplace to cater to people's concerns that they have at the moment. Now, this webinar is a great example of that. I've run webinars in the past where I normally get between 20 and 40 people register, and for this one we had just shy of 200, 198 people register. Now, my intention wasn't to, wasn't a marketing exercise. It was really to address issues that people had, but think about what's on people's minds, and can you modify your normal communication to align with how they're thinking. Create new offers, guarantees. If you don't have one, maybe put in place a guarantee to reduce the perceived risk of using your service, and negotiate better rates with your advertisers. So that's a key thing. So if you're doing newspaper advertising or other forms of advertising, go back to them. They're going to understand that that people may need to review whether or not they continue with their advertising, and they may be open to renegotiating the rates that they charge you. And lastly, improve your conversion rate. So conversion rate is all about, you get leads in the door, and then you have a conversation with them, and you put them through some sort of a process, and then you convert them into a client. Now, it's far easier to focus on what you're doing to have that conversation and improving that sales process than it is to rely on new leads coming in the door. Okay. Now, I ran some information about this at my last client day, talking about conversion rate and how it fits into the whole revenue generation process. So if you need a hand with that, definitely happy to sit down and just talk about your sales process and how you can give yourself a better, so I'm just going to mute someone here, and how you can give yourself a better chance of converting more of those leads. Okay. Any questions there? Feel free to ask any questions. All right, so the third area is managing your cash. So the first thing I would look at doing is looking at your credit and trying to extend the credit that's available to you. So some areas there to think about is obviously suppliers. Communicate with them. If you are having problems paying, be upfront and communicate that. Look at renegotiating terms if they can extend those. Your bank as well. Speak to them early, and potentially look for a mortgage holiday. Now, I know that banks are open to this, even outside of crisis times like this. So if you need to, and you are thinking that it's going to help your cash flow if you can get a holiday from your mortgage or from other loan repayments, then talk to your bank up front and do it now. Be on the front foot once again, rather than a month down the track when everyone's trying to do that with the bank. Okay. Put in place additional credit facilities potentially. Once again, it's going to be a lot easier to get those facilities in place, whether it's an overdraft, the lines of credit, whatever it might be. It'll be easy to do that now while things are still fairly sound, rather than down the track when the business may be hurting. Okay. So once again, be proactive about that. The ATO. So definitely continue to lodge your BASs, but the ATO is going to be very lenient about whether or not they chase these payments. So lodge the BAS, but potentially don't pay it. Once again, it's a unique situation for each business. So have a look at your situation and whether or not that may be an option for you. And definitely talk to your accountant about that as well. Just be aware that that's an option. Potentially refinance, get better rates, and look at both personal and business, not just business. Okay, so in terms of facilities, and credit, and potentially defer investments that you're going to make. Now, I say or not because some people who are in a good cash position may want to spend money to take advantage of the instant asset write-offs that have been announced as part of the stimulus package. So once again, it depends on your business. So Diana said here, the ATO are allowing a 4-month deferral on the next BAS, IAS, and each one thereafter. So Diana, I assume you're in the bookkeeping or accounting game there. So yes, so definitely as part of the stimulus that was announced. All right, better keep going. Next is tighten up your credit processes. So there is going to be an increased risk of default. Be aware of that. Customers may start delaying payments. So you really need to just review your credit processes, review your application and credit checking process, make sure that's happening, put people on credit watch potentially. Would love to hear the sorts of services people use for that. I know there are some credit watch agencies out there. So if anyone uses one, we'd love to hear some comments about that, and I'll share those with the group here. Definitely invoice quickly. Don't let your some people get busy and don't invoice on time. So definitely keep your invoicing on time, and also chase those invoices when due. All right. So all simple things, but things that you really need to look at tightening up, especially now. And also don't extend credit. That's a tricky one. I mean, there may be some customers where you decide to, but don't automatically do that as a policy. So Maria's shared that, okay, if your clinic renovated your rooms, is there an instant write-off with the stimulus package? Okay, that may, anything specific like that, I'd rather that you speak with your accountant about that, because it can depend on the renovation, how that's broken up into different parts. So definitely talk to your accountant about that one. All right. So I've whizzed through the 13 areas. I know it was very quick, but we did have a bit of time to talk about staffing issues and so on. 2 important areas I'd like to cover off before we wrap up. One is the stimulus. All right, that's a question that a lot of people have had. Now, I'm not going to be able to go through it in much detail because one, we don't have time, and I'm not a tax expert, and I would really encourage you to talk to your accountant. Definitely any of the Chan & Naylor accountants would be more than happy to go through it with you, or go to your own accountant. All right, so just very quickly though, withholding tax credit. So what will happen is that when you lodge your March BAS in April, that a half of your withholding tax that you enter into your BAS will be refunded as a credit, and same with your June BAS, which you will lodge in July. So that's obviously going to help people that are employing people, apprentices and trainees. So for the apprentice costs or wages between the 1st of January and the 30th of September, you will get half of that back. Now, I'm not sure what the process is, how they're going to do that, but you'll get half of any payments to apprentices back, up to $7,000 per quarter per person. Okay, so that's a massive benefit and stimulus there to encourage businesses to retain their apprentices and trainees. Instant asset write-off. Now, normally it's $30,000, but up to the end of June, if you spend money buying equipment, then you can write off all of that as a tax deduction in the first year or in the current year, up to $150,000. So I've got a client that provides equipment to the signage industry, and they're doing a campaign around that. So once again, looking for opportunities where you can use some of these, the current situation to actually boost your business. So they're hoping that their customers can bring forward some of those purchasing decisions to take advantage of this asset write-off. Accelerated depreciation, once again, talk to your accountant about that. Deferred tax payments we've talked about. There's, the ATO's allowing you to defer normal tax payments. You can also vary past BASs and my understanding is get a PAYG refund. Now, I don't know the specific details around that, but once again, talk to your accountant. Now, Joe is asking, when is the asset write-off from? Now, I think it was from, now, if anyone's on there that knows the exact date, but I think it's around about the 13th or 15th of March. It was basically when it was announced. So if any of the accountants out there who know that answer would be great. Nick, who was one of my clients, who was a landscaper, not an accountant, but he's saying he thought it was the 12th. And then lastly, if there are any penalties that you've been issued or interest, I think since January, sometime around the middle of January, they can be remitted and reversed as well. Okay. So once again, there's some great support out there. Just get across it. And lastly, to wrap up, know your numbers. Now, I'm an accountant by training. I always encourage my clients, and Nick, who's just made a comment, he's a great example of someone who knows his numbers, loves looking at his numbers, and you really need to understand your numbers. I always tell people that numbers are the language of business. So you really need to understand how your business ticks and what, understanding the numbers to make the better decisions, especially around times like this. So know which parts of your business are profitable, which services and which customers, and then obviously, promote the services that are more profitable. Look at reducing the ones that aren't, or not taking on customers that are unprofitable. Maybe shedding some of your customers now that aren't profitable and draining resources. Return on marketing, I've talked about. Understand that. Conversion rates, I've talked about. Break even, understanding what revenue you need to break even, but also to make certain profit targets. A great example of that is another client of mine that is an electrician. He wires houses, and he didn't know what his target number of houses per week were or should be. And we went through the exercise. He's a new client of mine. We went through the exercise, and now he's hitting those numbers. His revenue, his profitability is far greater. If he knows he's not going to hit the numbers for the week, he can bring forward some of the houses to complete earlier. And he's just fortunate that he can do that with the arrangement that he has with his customers. But he wouldn't do that if he didn't know the numbers and didn't know his targets. All right, so definitely understand your revenue targets. Read your financial reports, understand them, and do your cash flow forecasting as well, so you can preempt what cash impact there may be in the next month or two. All right, so definitely, if you need a hand with any of that, let me know. Happy to go through those sorts of things with you. And so lastly, questions. I've wrapped up that last part very quickly, but I know that everyone's committed to the hour, and I didn't want to go over too much. Now, Diane's also said, go to the Queensland Rural Industry Development Authority website and register for your expression of interest for the $250,000 loans, interest-free for the first year. Now, I'm not across other states. I know that every state is looking at a different stimulus package. New South Wales has announced payroll tax, basically a halt to payroll tax for the remainder of this financial year. And then they're bringing forward payroll tax reductions next year. It looks like Diane, who may be in Queensland, the Queensland government may have other interest-free loans that they're offering. So definitely go and have a look at those. Any other questions before we wrap up? All right, so if there aren't, then definitely I'm available if you need any assistance. I will send a link. I'm going to offer a free 10 to 15 minute conversation. If anyone wants to understand these strategies better, or talk more specifically about their business situation and generate some ideas, I need to keep it short, those sessions. So 10, 15 minutes is all I can do at the moment. I know I'll be booked up for the next week or so with those, but I will send a link out with the copies of these slides, and you can just click on the link and book in a time. All right. So thanks everyone. I hope you found that educational and useful. I'm getting some great thanks, and great for the initiative. So no, it's my pleasure. I know people are concerned, worried. Some are already hurting. So whatever we can do to help and not just help practically, but also get people refocused, and remotivated, and stay positive I think that's very important as well. All right, so definitely let me know if you've got any questions. I'll reach out by email when I send out the slides. But have a fantastic day. Enjoy the rest of the week, and yeah, feel free to get in touch if you need to.